I am so honored to be here. I am so tickled to be here. I'm learning things. I love doing that. This is a remarkable museum. You probably know that already, but I didn't. The digitization work that you all have done, the Smoky Hollow interpretive plaques and sculptures about that African-American neighborhood that fell to quote-unquote urban renewal. And just the beauty of the canopy roads here. Had a friend take us on a drive last night, and y'all live in a beautiful place. It's a delight. Somebody was about to applaud y'all. Applaud yourselves, yeah. That's great. So as Katie said, I'm going to brag on this at least twice. But in front of you is a typewritten sheet with a bunch of numbers and a bunch of names. And the last column over on the right is Rosenwald contribution. And when I was putting this together, folks suggested that perhaps I could work in some Tallahassee facts and figures. And so I did what every good researcher does. I asked Google. She knows everything. Google is all-knowing and all-wise, and Google turned up this sheet. And when the Raleigh Museum folks digitized it, there it was, and they put it online, and Google noticed the Rosenwald column. I think when they were putting it online, they weren't quite sure what they had, but if you're a good archivist, you put things online in the order that they come to you. And because I've done some work on Rosenwald schools in other states, I instantly realized that this is a list of all of the schools that folks knew about 1930. The Rosenwald Fund, I'll tell you the story, begins in the 19-teens. In the 30s, they pull back from funding schools and they begin earnestly funding change agents. If you know of a black scholar, a black artist, a black thinker, a black visionary, probably sometime in the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, they got a Rosenwald Fellowship. And that's how people like James Baldwin were able to be novelists and essayists, how Harry Belafonte was able to be not only a pop star, but also an organizer of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. So that is what surrounds this. In the early 30s, the fund was thinking that they would quit funding school building. And they had been so busy building schools, they hadn't really kept a list. And so they asked each state to write down what they knew about the schools that had been built in their state. And that's what you've got. And as far as I know, nothing else like that exists. So perhaps there's somebody here who's done some Rosenwald research. Are there folks here who've done some Rosenwald research? Who do? All righty. Talk for just a moment about what you've done. I need to get to know y'all.
My name is Marcus Curtis. Some of my research stems from Fisk University, who holds the collection of Rosenwald schools. They have photographs, and they have a database, but right now I think they're currently doing maintenance on their database, but you can eventually search it through their website.
And I know about Curtis because I had breakfast accidentally with Scott Wiseman. Talk about what you're working on with the Rosenwald schools, what you'd like to do.
Well, we're working together on these things. As the information becomes available, we're putting it all together in what we call story maps. So be able to tell that story using all the materials that we find.
And Scott Wiseman is GIS, Geographical Information Systems Program Coordinator for Tallahassee, Leon County, right? Cool. Give them a round of applause. They're doing the work. Anybody else done Rosenwald school research or school research more generally? Anybody? Well, I know somebody here who has. You got that beautiful new book. Y'all see the book about education in Leon County? It's one of the books that's going around. Miss Barnes, just say a word of welcome, if you would.
Well, Rosenwald School, yeah, the power from within. I was just explaining to Dr. Akbar what we did. We were able to get the photos, the original photos of the 53 one-room schoolhouses in Leon County, and the district wasn't even aware that they had schools by these names when we went there. But one of the former educators, Miss Thelma Lawrence, called me one day, and she brought out a scrapbook. She said when she was teaching, the Gene supervisor, who was the black superintendent during those days, had her to go to every school and do an assessment for health, safety, etc. And she came out with this scrapbook in a Sears rubber bag, and it had the photographs of the 52 one-room Negro schoolhouses. Among them were some Rosenwald schools. So that's what that book is, and we interviewed some of the former teachers, and then the last section, we decided to interview some of the students of those teachers. So that's what Power from Within. And that means though people were enslaved and had hardships, from within, they were elevating themselves through education.
Yes, yes. Ms. Barnes probably won't tell you this, but she is this year's honoree with the National Trust for Historic Preservation, the Louise DuPont Crowning Shield Award. She's not a very tall person, but she's a very big person. She's a big person in this community and beyond. Oh, this is wonderful. All righty, here in this room, maybe we have someone who went to a Rosenwald school. We got one in the back. Cool, got two. Let me go back to the person here. Would you be willing to say a word or two about what you remember?
Good evening. I'm Stephanie Clark. I'm a native of Panama City, Bay County, which is on the list. I didn't go way back when it was originally established, but I'm old enough. I went when it was a junior high school. So I went 7th through 9th grade. I actually walked to Rosenwald junior high school at that time. So presently in Panama City, the school itself is still there, still called Rosenwald, but it's an academy, so they do different grades now than when I attended.
Round of applause for this person. This is great. How many folks went to a school that, well, in my lifetime, even though I grew up in rural Virginia, schools had one teacher for each grade, sometimes two teachers for each grade. But as I've talked to people, there are folks that remember the country schools where there might be two grades in one room. And that's true for black schools. It's also true for white schools. Anybody here grew up in one of those schools? I see one hand here. All right. Would you say a word about how they did it with two classes and one teacher? That's the opposite of what you need, you know?
No, it was 4 classes and one teacher, and it was a 2-room schoolhouse with a stage for the 5th and 6th grade, and 1 through 4 were downstairs or 3 steps down. And so we only had 2 teachers from 1 through 6th grade. We had 2 teachers 1 through 6th grade. Yeah.
So how did that work? What, do you remember? Because the teacher was good, probably you just assumed that was normal, but it amazes me.
Well, to me, we had a great time. We did our work when they were working with the 1st grade, 2nd grade. And so I had a great experience in the 2-room schoolhouse. That's all I can say.
Thank you. Round of applause here. Isn't that great? So I brought along some slides and tell you some of what I know about Rosenwald schools. There's a lot I don't, which is one of the reasons why it is really fun to encounter people here who have firsthand knowledge one way or another. But the way that I got started with this, I was a historic preservation intern in Charlotte, North Carolina, and I got a call from the McClintock church community. If you know Charlotte, you know Carowinds, and Carowinds is new, amusement park, relatively new. The McClintock Church is right next to an AME Zion, or is an AME Zion church, and right next to it is the school. I'll show you the school in a little bit. The minister said, our community has melted away. Used to be that if you went out in the countryside, there were tenant farmers, black tenant farmers who would live in a particular area. They would come in to go to church together, and that's how the schools happened. But as we have become a more prosperous society and we have cars and city jobs and all of that, the church was sitting there by itself, the Rosenwald School and the church, and that was it. And the minister said it was a Rosenwald school, and I'd never heard of that. And at that point, all these books that have been going around, I hope that they've come to you. They hadn't been written yet. And so I was in New York City, and I went to the Schomburg. The Schomburg is the Black history library in probably the world, pretty close. It's up in Harlem. And at that point, they still had card catalogs. And so I looked at the card catalog just to see, what there might be. And I remembered this Rosenwald thing. And there was a book, and there were pamphlets. And it was a story that people who went to those schools remember, but the rest of us, it hadn't been passed down to us. And so what I've got today is from a website that my wife, Carol, put your hand up. Boop. She builds websites, historysouth.org. And it's kind of what we know about these Rosenwald schools. Over 5,300 of these. How many is that? Well, there are not that many McDonald's in the South. And you know how ubiquitous the McDonald's is. And so what we have, what I'll share with you are some photographs from North Carolina, and then I'll take you through the community school plan book. This was affiliated with Sears Roebuck. Some of you may know about the Sears Roebuck houses, where you could mail order a complete house. This is not part of that same program, but it's that same part of American history, where folks are trying to create models that we can all follow as we are going about our increasingly busy lives. And so that's what I'll do with most of this, is take you through that plan book, talk a little bit about Mecklenburg, North Carolina schools, which I know a bunch about, and then I'll also salt in something about the Lucy Moten School at FAMU, right? The Lincoln High School over in Frenchtown on Brevard Street. The Bradfordville School. Y'all been on Bradfordville Road? There's a school. And there were more schools than that. It turns out there were 7 Rosenwald schools in this county. And thank you to the Digitization Project. We don't have addresses. They didn't have addresses out in the county at that point. But you get a sense of what was here and what some pieces of it might still be here. So for our GIS friends, we start with a map. This is the southern United States. This is July 1, 1932, which is when the fund quit building schools. They built one last one for Eleanor Roosevelt at the summer White House in the state that I can't remember right at the moment. But anyway, this is pretty much all of them. In Florida, the Rosenwald Fund aided construction of 128 schools. They would also build a teacher's home, and at least one workshop. And so that's what we know about who was what and what was where. You'll see that the frequency of the dots follows the plan, the geography of where a lot of African Americans lived. This is called the Black Belt here. This was where big plantations were a big thing. This is North Carolina, and North Carolina had a number of historically black colleges and universities, and those were part of the organizing for the 813 Rosenwald schools in Mecklenburg County. So let me tell you the story. Some of you know it, some of you don't. But the Rosenwald schools, Mr. Rosenwald, very important. I'll tell about him in a minute. But he's not the guy that thought it up. If you know anything about grant writing, if you know anything about getting a building funded, you don't name it after the person who wrote the grant. You name it after the person who might give you money in the grant. And so that is what's going on here. Booker T. Washington, of course, born in slavery in Virginia, made his way to a little one-room school, and from there went to Hampton Institute in the Norfolk area, and came out as one of the education leaders of American history. And that's a story that you probably know. Tuskegee Institute down in Alabama, the college that he founded that is still there, and it's a great pleasure to go see it. But as he did that, he was really frustrated because a college is a wonderful thing, but you need a pipeline of students who are ready to go to college. And the historically black colleges and universities, almost all of them started as academies, creating that pipeline, because in slavery times it was, in most states, illegal to teach an enslaved person to read and write. Some folks, thank goodness, have broken that rule. But how do you create a pipeline that will get folks to college? And Booker T. Washington was at a point in American history that reminds me a little bit of Little House on the Prairie. You remember Little House on the Prairie? And at some point in the book and the TV series, I guess, as well, folks got together and built their own school. And that was the way schools had been built in the 19th century. And we were moving away from that to big, what they called union schools, schools that had a number of grades that would pull students from a wider geographic area. Eventually, you would have school buses and things like that. But Booker T. Washington said, the way we build our pipeline is we get communities to build one-room schools. And the notion of everybody getting together, building the school, that was a powerful part of the story. And the schools, he believed, were not just for children. They should be community centers. Because in the South, those sharecropper communities really dispersed. There's no place that people come together, everybody. Now, there are churches, but the AME Zion folks may not agree with the Baptists, and they may not want to go to the church with the Presbyterians. And so having some place that is in addition to churches, that was part of Booker T. Washington's vision. So he started down in Alabama and got a school built not that far from Tuskegee. And boy, that was a lot of work. And he started looking for an angel, looking for somebody who would help fund a campaign of school building. And this is about 1905, something like that. This is when segregation was getting way worse. This is when in North Carolina, the sit at the back of the streetcar laws happened, and the swearing on the separate Bibles in court happened. And white allocations for white schools kind of puttered along. This is the South. We weren't really excited about that. But white allocations, white controlled school boards, not really interested in allocating money to black schools. And so Washington starts with people getting together, building one school, building two schools. And he's on the road all the time. He's a college administrator. If any of you are college administrators, my hats are off to you, because you got to go and talk with people that have money all the time. And that's the way you get money. And he found his angel. Henry Huddleston Rogers. You guys have never heard of Henry Huddleston Rogers. Henry Huddleston Rogers was from New England. He had gone to what they called a high school, which was a way radical thing. And so he believed in education. He was the vice president of Standard Oil, what's now Exxon. Huge amount of money. He said, 5 years, I'll help you build schools. We'll do a matching grant thing. I'll do it for 5 years and see how it goes. And then he died in year 4 without a will. And his children said, "You're giving our money away to do what?" And that was the end of the school building program. But Booker T. Washington kept getting on the train, going up north, talking to the bigwigs. And one day he met Julius Rosenwald. Julius Rosenwald is somebody who should be much more famous than he is. You've heard of Sears Roebuck? Sears and Roebuck were two guys that had a general store in Chicago until Rosenwald came along and said, we can make this national. And so most of us, there are a few young people here, how many grew up with the Sears Roebuck catalog? Oh yeah, it was like Amazon, only more so. It was great. And it was national, and it served everybody. It didn't care what color you were, because the post office delivered to everybody. Now that sounds duh, of course the post, no, they didn't. It was not until the 1890s that the federal government came up with rural free delivery, RFD. Used to be a TV show, Mayberry RFD. Country folk could get mail delivered right to their house, which meant that Sears Roebuck could deliver the catalogs right to everybody's house. They could deliver the agricultural machinery and the bookcases and the pinafores and the boots, and everything you wanted to order would come right to your house. Wow. And so that is how Julius Rosenwald made a fortune. And Julius Rosenwald had grown up in Springfield, Illinois. Springfield, Illinois, if you look back in the history, there was a really ugly, what they call race riot there. And I don't have the details in my head, but white folks taking off against black folks, and it was just ugly. And that was when Rosenwald was a young person. And he said, that shouldn't happen. We should have a society where everybody can partake of everything. And so that was why the schools seemed like a good idea. Now, he was a Jewish person, and in the Jewish scriptures, again, I will not have this exactly right, but it basically says if God blesses you, you should turn around and do good things and not call attention to yourself. And so Julius Rosenwald did a lot of that. YMCAs. YMCAs were a way for country folks coming to the big city to get some wholesome exercise. They often had a place to stay. He funded 24 black YMCAs. In northern cities, there's one in Atlanta, there's one in Youngstown, Ohio. His name isn't on them. And he funded a lot of stuff in Chicago, because that's where he was based. I love the Museum of Science and Industry. Anybody been to the Museum of Science and Industry? It should be the Rosenwald Museum of Science and Industry, but he refused to let his name be on it. So what happens is that Washington and Roosevelt first get together over building the YMCAs, and then Mr. Washington says, you know, there's this school pipeline thing I've been working on. Would you be interested? And Mr. Rosenwald comes down to Tuskegee Institute, looks at those rural schools that folks had built with their hands, and he said, let's give it a try. And because he was a systems thinker, he thought about it in terms of systems of empowerment. I just made that up. I hope I can support it. Basically, he wasn't just giving away money. He required that every state that wanted to get money, all of them in the South, because that's where most African Americans were. The Great Migration to the North was just beginning. Most Southern states did not have any black person in any bureaucratic office at all. Until Mr. Rosenwald said, if you want money from my fund, you got to hire a white person to be the in-house guy with the state legislature and with the school boards and stuff. You have to hire a white executive, and you have to hire a black executive who has basically the same title, who's the outside guy, goes to talk to people in communities all across your state. And so what we're looking here at this next slide is Dr. George E. Davis, I'm not sure if he's in that photograph, but that's his work. In North Carolina, that Rosenwald agent was George E. Davis. He was the first black professor at Johnson C. Smith University, historically black college. When he retired, I just retired. I don't want to do anything for anybody. I just want to retire. And well, he kept working. And he kept working as that state agent. And it was work because he had to go to every community that was thinking it might want a school and talk with them and help them raise money. And so here you are looking at January 11th through 13th, 1928. Wednesday evening, he's in Magnolia, North Carolina. Thursday evening, he's in Wallace, North Carolina. Friday afternoon, he's in Chinquapin, North Carolina. Friday evening, he's at Faison, North Carolina. There are not interstate highways. There are not paved roads. There often are not roads at all. And he's doing this kind of thing. And what he does is convince local black communities who are already paying taxes to dig down, come up with a little bit more money. Could be cash money. There is not a lot of cash money in the rural South at this point. You tended to get paid, if you got paid at all, at harvest time. But nonetheless, people came up with nickels and dimes and dollars. That's what you see on the table there. Sometimes they had fundraising events. I would have loved to have been to a fundraising event. The one that I remember were box parties. Anybody heard of a box party? Box party, the young women in the community would make up a shoebox or whatever else they had, put in it a piece of pie, maybe a piece of cornbread, something, a little bit of fried chicken maybe, and wrap it up in a bow and put their name on it, and the young men in the community would bid on it. And sometimes the bidding would get real spirited, and that was a good thing. Now, has anybody heard of a box party? This is a grassroots miracle. This is a situation in which people who are very poor and have no say in local politics or state politics figure out how to find a way, how to make a way. And if I was a really good teacher, I'd quit there, because that is one of the main reasons to talk about the Rosenwald School, particularly in the times that we are in right now, where things do not seem to be getting better of their own. I think this notion of coming together and making it happen is something to watch for. So what did they make happen? Well, schools were very rudimentary at that point. We are used to going to school for 9 months of the year. We're used to doing this all through our growing up. At this point, school was something you did once you got done with your farm work. And you might have 6 weeks of school. You might have 3 months of school. Wasn't a year-round thing. In some communities, see if this happened in your community, you'd be going to school in the fall, and then it would be time in October to harvest the cotton, and the school would shut down. 2-3 weeks. Kids would go out and harvest cotton, come back again. Anybody grow up in that world? Nope. Okay, cool. The buildings weren't any fancier than the school calendar. They were old farm buildings, and they didn't have big windows. They didn't have electricity. There wasn't electricity out in the countryside. One of the folks who wrote about this back in the day had taught at one of these. He said his tongue was in his cheek. He said it was great for a teacher because you could study the stars through the roof. You could study botany through the walls, and you could study geography looking at the floor. There were so many holes. Well, see, here you can see that this is not a really great school, right? See the two little girls? See the two little girls? What you're seeing down below is a 2-teacher Rosenwald school. By today's standards, it does not look like much, but it was a big deal. A room here for one teacher, a room there for another teacher, and in between what they called an industrial room. An industrial room would be, my wife tutors at a school near us, and they have a room for kids that need to be brought out and work with a tutor, something like that. The industrial room also was where the community ladies would come in and they'd fix lunch while the teachers were teaching in the adjacent rooms. As far as I can tell, nobody learned anything industrial in any of the industrial rooms, though if you know Booker T. Washington, industrial education was a thing that he talked a lot about, particularly when he was looking at industrialists up north who had good pockets. And so calling it an industrial room, well, it gave the teacher a little bit more room to wiggle around. So that's what happened in my county of Mecklenburg. That's what happened in your county of Leon. And I was about to tell you all about that, and I did. I was up in the middle of the night the other day, and I did one last Google search, Rosenwald, Leon County. And I came across something that was from the Riley Archives, number 11320. It said it was school budget figures or something. The person, they didn't know what they were looking at when they digitized it, but they digitized it. That's great. And so what you're looking at here is probably about 1930, and it is folks in the state looking back county by county. That's why you've got that handout in your chair there. And here in Leon County, we had Bel Air, a one-room school, Bradfordville, a three-room school, County Training, I'm pretty sure that that's the Lucy Moten School, 5-room, Lincoln High, great big building, 13 teachers. Akalakni, am I saying it right? What they said. Pleasant Grove, 1 teacher, and I think this is Ward, W-A-R-D. Is that Ward? Woo, all righty. Isn't that wonderful? I mean, I just, it's boring, really, is what it is. It's a bunch of names and figures, but it tells a whole story. At Bradfordville, that 3-room school, the total cost here is about $6,500. The black neighbors put up about 1,000 of that. The public school board, who should have paid for the whole thing themselves, doggone it, but they didn't, put up $4,700. And there's the Rosenwald Fund, $700. And that is a pretty standard pattern. The Rosenwald Fund was a seed grant. It was a matching grant, but it wasn't a 100% match. And county by county, community by community, the Rosenwald agents would work with the local folks. Maybe somebody had a wood lot, and they would log that wood lot. Or maybe they had, in our community, we had a guy that black guy owned 100 acres of land, donated 3 of those acres to build the Billingsville School. And the ultimate point of all of this for Mr. Rosenwald was to get the locality to adopt the school, so that it wouldn't just be the community school, it would be funded by all of the taxpayers. And so this little incentive, once the school is built, it becomes part of the county's stock of good schools. Community school plans, and that's what I want to do for the most of the time we have together. This book came out many times with many different plans in it. This is the one that we digitized and Carol put up on historysouth.org. And there is the whole school yard. There's a one-room school. And let me take you through there. So this was a machine for learning. You had to have at least 2 acres. And you would build the school, but you would also build play areas. You would build sanitary privies. This is a big deal. There was not plumbing. There were not septic systems. There was not city sewer and water. You dug a hole in the ground, put a seat over it. And I'm actually old enough so that I can remember those in the piece of Indianapolis where my grandparents lived. But having those here and done scientifically so that disease did not spread, that was a powerful thing. There is baseball, there's gardening, And here are trees planted so that the wind does not whip across your fields and take away your good soil. So it looks like, a pretty picture, but it's really cool. Same thing when you start looking at the individual buildings. This is the basic unit, one room, and it says when planning the schoolhouse, it should be kept in mind that the modern school is one designed to serve the entire community. And what that meant, whenever possible, a good auditorium large enough to seat the entire community should be erected in connection with every community school. If there are not sufficient funds for an auditorium, 2 adjoining classrooms with a movable partition may be made to serve this purpose. And that's what you got here. You have the classroom, you have that industrial room, there's the movable partition, and there's a bank of windows over here. There are small windows here above the chalkboard. And the windows are, well, here's your desks, there's your teacher. The windows are on your left. Why would the windows be on your left? Light. Light is coming in those big windows, and left-hand people, I apologize, but most folk are right, and that way you're not blocking the light coming in. Wow, okay, that's kind of cool. Come in the front door here, and there are 2 coat closets, 2 cloakrooms. Y'all remember the cloakrooms from when you were kids? The cloakrooms were a place for everything and everything in your place. That was a real big deal in the early 20th century. But it was also, now, did any of you misbehave in school? Did you ever get to see the inside of a cloakroom for that reason? The young people don't know what I'm talking about. Are you willing to tell about what the cloakroom meant? I saw somebody who almost had a hand up. He isn't going to admit it. Yeah, that's where the teacher would give you a talking to or whatever it was that you needed. And so that's part of the basic unit as well. So that's a one-room school. Let me show you a couple of one-room schools, and we'll get to the one that I got ahead of myself a little bit. This is a school that was just recently saved. You can see the apartments were coming up to eat it up. This is the Siloam School in what had been very rural Mecklenburg County. It's basically where Interstate 85 and 485 hit each other. It's where this community used to be. The school was still there. And the school is very clearly this school, but it's not a Rosenwald school. The plans were so good that other people would use them, including white schools. I went to a white school that's built out of the Rosenwald Community Plan book. But here, this was a black school, and the folks who saved it were the Masons. Some of you were here earlier this afternoon, and there was a wonderful celebration presenting some Masonic artifacts from the background of John G. Riley. He was there's a name for this, and I can't remember it, but the most important Masonic guy in this region for decades. The Masons involved in this, they picked it up on a flatbed truck, took it to the museum in Charlotte Museum of History. There's a parking lot, there's space next to the parking lot, completely restored it. Silver Set Masonic Lodge, and they were one of the leaders in that. And so you end up with a beautiful little building. No air conditioning, no plumbing, no electricity, because they didn't have it back then. And colors that are chosen to reflect light. Electricity hasn't come yet. And so the sun is coming in. If you have the ceiling and the upper walls cream, and the lower walls a dark color so that the light doesn't reflect up into folks' eyes, you can magnify the amount of natural light that's useful to you as you're a pupil. And you can see on this afternoon when they took the picture at the top there, how much light floods into that building. So that is one kind of one room. Now, they had different plans for where it sat with relation to the compass. And so this is one plan. This is the other plan with that little inset door. And that is the Bel Air School. I apologize for putting you off for so long. Talk about Bel Air.
Well, the school is located in the community Bel Air where the well-to-do folks went to, get away from malaria at the time. They call it the yellow fever. And so this particular community is south of Tallahassee, near the Woodville Highway. There's a subdivision down there at Montijo, I believe the name of it is. And this particular school was there until around 1952, and it was removed, and it kind of just vanished at that point. During that time period, they did, the officials, local government, utilize these buildings in different places, so it could have been placed somewhere else and demolished or, as time went on.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that. I turned this up with my friend Google, who knows everything, and she pointed me to Florida Memory, State Library and Archives of Florida. Folks been on that? You could leave right now if you want to go and start Googling, because it's like candy. It is absolutely wonderful. So there were several one-room schools, you saw that, and they were probably one or the others of these designs. In the community school plan book, the one that I've run into the most often is two-teacher schools. And that was the one that I showed you with the two little girls. And this is in Gaston County, which is very close to Charlotte. It's like the next county over. I'm sorry, Lincoln County. And here, I don't know if you can see this, but in the background, you can see where the movable partition was. And we're looking from one classroom into the other, as it would be if you were set up for a community event. Here is, again, seeing inside the building we saw before, there's the movable partition, there's a cloakroom, there's a cloakroom, there's the industrial room, the big windows with all of the lights, all of the light coming in are on your left-hand side. Beautiful. Three-teacher schools. This is the one, Carol and I found one, we were driving along near the airport in Raleigh, and we found one, and we've lost it. But we're hoping at some point they'll get in touch with us and sell it to us, because it's wonderful. The three-teacher schools are the size of a bungalow, and there are different details to the way that they're laid out, but all of them are using that same one-room module and just expanding it. On the right, at the top, that's the Silverset Lodge, the Masonic Lodge that I was talking about in rural Mecklenburg County. Down below is the McClintock School, which is the one that got me started with all of this. And you can see that there's a lot of difference. But if you look at the essentials of the building, Rosenwald didn't care what kind of architecture you put on the outside of it. Just make sure that it was weather-tight and that it was a good place to study. Almost all of them were wooden, but here in Greer Heights, near the Mint Museum of Art, if you know Charlotte, black community around a farmer named Samuel Billings, and he gave land for the school, but he also got his neighbors to pony up an additional amount so that they could sheathe it in brick. And that brick school over the long term was good for maintenance. It is still today very much like what he would have seen back in the 1920s. It's about to have its 100th birthday, and it's the community center for Greer Heights. And we have in Leon County one three-teacher school. It's not quite out of the plan books I have. It's from another edition, I imagine. This is the Bradfordville School. And maybe you have a thing to say about Bradfordville? We have never talked to each other before, so do you have anything that you want to add here?
I'm
I'm a little bit deaf, so I miss things.
I'm not certain, but we do have a Bradfordville school that's right there on Bannerman Road, and I'm thinking that may be the same building. I don't remember this particular photograph, but this possibly could be a school on Highway 12 also. I'm not certain.
It's in the book that we were passing around. There's a vintage photograph of this, and I see a hand over here.
I live not very far from it. It's near the Target, and I heard that it's in private hands, and someone or other wanted to get a hold of it, and their person had not allowed it to be done, but it really needs to be taken care of. It needs a lot of TLC. You all could work with it, but I wish someone would.
All righty, there's a challenge. Maybe somebody knows the folks that own that. It'll come back in the slideshow in just a minute. So they went all the way up to 5-teacher, more than 5-teacher. I've just picked these two here. What it is a bank of classrooms with the auditorium extending out the back, or 2 banks of classrooms with their own entrances and the auditorium in the middle. This is the school that I went to as a kid in Troutville, Virginia, white school built for white people, out of the Rosenwald Plan Book. So it's pretty cool. You will recognize this, maybe, when we go over to the Lucy Moten Elementary School. And I'm seeing a moment of excitement here. Let me pass this over.
I didn't know that Lucy Moten was a Rosenwald school, but I attended that school for elementary school. And the way it was set up, it was probably about first to sixth grade. And then downstairs, we had a basement, and that's where the auditorium was, and that's where we had music class. And we had a stage there and everything. It was a wonderful experience. And then it was attached to the high school. There was a high school, Florida A&M University, high school, FAMU High. Yeah, but Lucy Moten, and they're preserved it to this day. And it looks just like that. I have a picture of myself in front of it.
Yeah, I went there too. This school, I remember that classroom over there. That was 5th grade. Yes, Miss Wright, that's right. 5th grade, 5th and 6th grade were what you see on this side, and on the other card were the lower classes, excuse me. They built the high school next to Lucy Moten. It's no longer there, or it's been redone, but it's moved down to Orange Avenue. But this was where I went to elementary school and junior high until I integrated Leon.
Give a round of applause to these historians here. This is just great.
I think that school is near the intersection of Belvedere and Bradfordville Road, which is on the old Fauchelie plantation.
There you go. That's the Bradfordville story. Yeah, this is what they often did in historically black colleges was that Rosenwald would set up a model school so that teachers could learn in the best kind of school. And so you've got one there. I've seen one at Savannah State. I've seen one at UNC Greensboro.
I did 12 years at Lucy Moten and then to FAMU High as well. And the primary grades were on the right entrance, 1st, 2nd, and 3rd grade, 3 classrooms there. And then on the left entrance, I was 4th, 5th, and 6th grade, classrooms there. And then in the center, those were actually used as high school classrooms in conjunction with the high school classes that were really originally Army barracks that they'd moved over from Dale Mabry Field. And so the high school was originally these Army barracks that they had put in the back of the school building. But this is the original building. but it housed both the elementary and the high school.
Oh, no, Dr. This is retired professor of psychology from Florida State University, Dr. Naeem Akbar.
I have a special memory here. I have two, actually. In my school, this was the library. And they had the complete run of the biographies for children of important people, Henry Ford and the Ringling Brothers circus people. And that's how I learned it. I loved history. So I'm glad for that. Y'all had a better layout, evidently, than we did in Troutville. In Troutville, this was the gymnatorium. This was where you played basketball, and anybody who played basketball there drowned out the surrounding classrooms. So they weren't perfect schools, but they're pretty cool. Any other Lucy Moton people? Alrighty, I'm running up toward the end here. There are some students at Lucy Moton, and here we are with Mr. John G. Riley. Yes, indeed. And I'm not going to tell you this history because you guys are on the board and you're members of the museum. You know that he was one of the people coming out of slavery times who helped build up an educational infrastructure. He was principal from 1892 to 1926. He is not the person, assuming we got the dates right, who was there when the Rosenwald peace was built, but he laid the groundwork, literally and figuratively. If you go to Brevard, West Brevard, 438 West Brevard Street, you can see the big front building, which is where the auditorium is, and in the back, the classroom building that looks a great deal like what I've been showing you. Students in the library of the original Lincoln High School in the 1940s from Florida memory, that wonderful resource. And this is what the front of the building looked like yesterday when I went by to see what it looked like. And I commend the plaques here. There's also a plaque near the street. It's worth getting out of your car because it tells the stories of people like Nursing Administrator Millicent Hollifield challenged the segregated Leon County and state nurses training programs, established a school at Lincoln High that trained black nurses. And so this is not just your ABCs, we all need our ABCs, but it's also the special training that today would be at FAMU or would be at a community college, and here it is.
Wasn't there a John G. Riley Elementary School? Yeah, yeah. Does it still exist? Okay, okay. I'm sorry. I haven't been home for a long time. Okay, but I do remember. But I never knew who John G. Riley was. That was it. That's the issue. Okay.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. All righty, a couple more slides. So what's going to happen next? Who knows? But there began an effort to create a Julius Rosenwald and Rosenwald Schools National Historic Park. There are a couple other ones kind of like this. I think there's one about Reconstruction. It's not a big piece of land with a mountain in the middle of it. That's our thought about a national park. This would be distributed. There would be buildings wherever. And to prove this was possible, the folks who made the presentation used y'all's schools. There is the Bradfordville School when it was a little bit better painted. There's the Lucy Moton Elementary School. I don't know whether it's going to work, but the work that people have put in here to build those schools, to preserve those schools, to attend those schools, to honor the history of those schools, to write that book that's coming around about these schools. That's the way you make history. That's the way you make community. And folks did it all over the South. So with that, let me stop. Questions, comments, things we haven't talked about yet?
How did Mr. Rosenwald, being Jewish, establish the YMCA?
That is such a great question. I'm not an expert on the YMCA. I read the answer to that, but I don't remember. He was a person of great practicality. And much like Booker T. Washington, even though they came from completely different backgrounds. And when he figured out something needed to happen, he figured out how to make it work. And so I think that's why a Jewish guy funds YMCAs. Great question. Yes, let me see if I can get this to you.
I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to ask this question correctly. Okay, you said that in order for him to contribute money, they had to have the local people contribute, and also, I guess it's like the school board. But you mentioned that they weren't really interested in the black schools receiving funds, so how were they able to convince them to contribute?
Took a lot of convincing. I think that's what the state agent, the white guy, who was in the state capitol, I think he spent a lot of his time saying, you guys, we're about to give you a bunch of money. Do this little thing. And people like being given money. And so I think that was part of the thing that made it work. But in the Rosenwald Fund archives, some are at Fisk, some are at Peabody Institute, which is another Nashville school. Some of them are in Chicago at various places in Chicago. But you'll find letters back and forth. And there was just a whole lot of hand-holding, what we call now hand-holding, to make this work. One or two others? Anybody else? And yes.
Just a question. Are you aware if there are any artifacts or any exhibit of the Rosenwald schools in the Smithsonian African American Museum?
Yes. And it's in the African American Museum. It's the same floor that has a number of vignettes of Black life, including the Divine Nine, the sororities and fraternities. Go in that hallway, you'll come across a map of all of the Rosenwald schools. You'll come across drawings from the community school plan book, and then desks, much like what you have here in your exhibit, desks from one of the actual schools. And I'll just brag, the map is from our website, and the drawings are from our website. And so it just felt good to see that. Thank you for that question. So this is a story that touches everybody. It touches folks with African American connections, for sure. It touches folks like me, who grew up in a more rural America than we have here. But I think it mostly touches folks like the folks that are coming together around the Riley Center and Museum, which is you. This is how we make stories that glue together our communities, and how we pass along the knowledge of who we are.
Just one quick question. Some folks here might know. The Jack Hadley Museum in Thomasville, are there any artifacts or displays regarding the Rosenwald School there? I've been once, but I didn't know about the Rosenwald School at the time. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. We'll have to go back and check that out.
Cool. Thomasville Museum. Give you all sounds a round of applause. Thank you so much. Thank you.